And as the old African proverb goes, when spider webs unite, they can halt even a lion. If each of us takes our own spider webs and we unite in a giant spider web, we can halt the lion of war.
Welcome to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl, a podcast that illuminates the path to collective healing at the intersection of science and mysticism. In his conversations with visionaries, innovators, artists, and healers, Thomas invites guests into a relational experience that allows inspiration and innovation to emerge. This is the Point of Relation. Our guest for today's episode is William Ury. William Ury is one of the world's leading experts on negotiation and mediation, co-founder of Harvard's program on negotiation, and a best-selling author. Over the past 35 years, he has served as a negotiation advisor and mediator in conflicts from ethnic wars in the Middle East, the Balkans, and former Soviet Union, and most recently, in Colombia. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
William, we are back here today after almost a year past. Our first conversation happened. It was amazing. We were in such a flow and we were talking about how we put ourselves into the shoes of other people, how we are our own enemy. And like we were in a deep conversation, we brought in trauma and talked about the recurrent effects of trauma. What happened at the same time was that I was sitting in a sound studio in the basement of a building that was soundproof. And during our conversation, there was a 40-minute missile attack on Tel Aviv with many, many missiles, many, Iron Dome missiles catching them. And while we were talking, I had a strange feeling, but I didn't hear anything. So there was no way to know. So we continued with our conversation. And then just at the end, I found out that what's happening. And then there was a 2-week war, basically. And so we are resuming our conversation today. So first of all, I'm happy that we are here together again. And at the same time, right now, there is another war. And so Russia and Ukraine are at war. So I would love to maybe make a transition with you from our last conversation to this conversation and see, first of all, how you are, and then let's see how we dive deeper into our current situation.
Yeah, it's really, really good to see you again, Thomas. And it's just very curious how that first podcast, we were talking about the very phenomenon of war and the trauma from which war arises. And then suddenly there's a missile attack. And now we're resuming the podcast that was interrupted in the middle of another war that's affecting, I think, everyone around the planet is paying attention to this war. It's like, I can feel the kind of collective, I'm getting messages from Brazil, from just Africa. Everyone is somehow part of this, the whole collective human nervous system. And I can feel it myself. And I'm asking this question of what can be done in the midst of this trauma-induced war. And I'm aware of having been to Ukraine and been to Russia many times, sometimes a long time ago, and having gone through the Cold War, and now this strange resonance of another Cold War looming with the risk of nuclear war. It's I'm studying the way in which my own system is profoundly unsettled by this.
And maybe we talk about this because like last time when I came out from that basement, and I understood, like I came out and there was immediately to feel that the whole atmosphere had changed because it was unexpected. It was not, that we knew that that's going to come. like it was unexpected, and I could feel like I'm coming out of our conversation into like a different Tel Aviv. And I think maybe we can talk a little bit about also that like how important it is to relate to how that affects us, and not just try to not have it, but to talk about it. Because, for example, at that time, it's very clear that even if there's a security system or like a missile deflection or defense system, still it's like an attack on life and potentially on your life, even if it's not happening. And the collective fear that's rising immediately, like there's a collective quality suddenly in the air. And also when I woke up that morning, I had a very strange feeling, like when I woke up, and then I opened the news and I saw what was happening. But the shock of like an invasion and the human catastrophe of war, like the human side of it, like I feel it deeply, like every day when that's happening. And I'm curious also how you first, before we go into the mechanics of it, like how that affects you. And I know you were very active also in the Cold War, so there's like something emerging. And for everybody like myself, every European citizen, the Second World War is starting to resonate in the collective unconscious very strongly, and millions of people feel it. So maybe we start with the personal feeling a bit, and then go into the mechanics maybe of what we can do and see.
I really appreciate that, Thomas, that opportunity, because it's, as we've talked in our previous conversations, any war anywhere around the world is us, right? And because there's this profound interconnection of humanity at both in material levels, but at subtle levels. And so I can just, inside of me, it just brings me back biographically to growing up in Europe. I spent half my childhood in Switzerland after not that long after World War II. And I just remember as a child feeling World War I, World War II. You could still see ruins when I traveled around France or Germany or Italy or Yugoslavia. Buildings were still in ruins. It wasn't like the Europe of today. And there was every expectation that World War I, World War II, that there would be World War III. And every building in Switzerland had a nuclear bomb shelter. And that's, and I went into it almost like that's where you kept your skis. So I was in there, and it just felt like, as a boy, I remember thinking, there has to be some better way for humans to deal with our differences than this. And that's really what set me on my course till today. So for me, then I worked as a young man, and I spent 10 years working on the Cold War. That's really what I wanted to work on, was how do we reduce the risk of a nuclear war, which would snuff off tens, hundreds of millions of lives and possibly put an end to life on Earth as we know it. So for me, there's some kind of resonance. Also, I have ancestry that goes back to Ukraine. And so I'm just aware of just all the threads of my life that are entwined in this particular situation right now, and the tragedy of it, and also just aware of so in my body, I can, just going very personally, I can feel anxiety arising, fear. And I've just been learning how anxiety and fear actually have different, almost neural networks. Fear is fear of the outside, but anxiety is kind of almost like a fear of the inside, of what's going on inside me. So I can feel it. And of course, all this, the news and the social media, just the immediate kind of empathy with people who are suffering and caught, you know, as missiles are striking or they're fleeing, the fear, the panic, it's unsettling. And so it's really calling upon me to like address my own nervous system so that I can be available to be of assistance in the larger phenomenon right now that's going on. And for me, what I've always found is the best antidote to that kind of anxiety is conscious action, is to move into action, to engage in the phenomenon, actually not to move away from it, but to move towards it. And that's what I find myself doing, is asking this question of how can we witness this, you know, in your terms, and then how can I be of assistance?
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that you're so refined in your introspection, like to that, because the way I look at this is like there are multiple layers I would love to talk with you about. And one is that you started already to describe how the layers of the collective trauma of the Second World War, for example, starts to resonate within many of us now when the new war in Europe hits, which is intertwined. They are connected, obviously, and how refined we can look at our, like how the archaeology of our own past, like your Ukrainian ancestors or my Austrian ancestors, and you know how the culture that we grew up in. Like I also felt as a boy in Vienna, this kind of strange dead atmosphere that some places had, or the kind of the collective had in a certain way. Where today I look at this like I understand this very differently, but at that time I just felt, oh, life feels that way. That's how life is, but not that how much energy and how much pain is stored in between us that we don't even know about, that's there. And I think your refined description is a very great example how, like, not neglecting what comes up in us, but allowing it to get digested. And I think as collectives, we have little competence in, or training, because we didn't get trained in that, how we digest that material that comes up in order to be able to respond in a different way, and not just be part of a fragmentation, a very strong othering, and like a very strong deflection of the moment, but to be able to respond to it. And when I listen to you, I hear a lot of, I need to do my inner work also, and it's not opposing me acting, like that they can be in parallel, that we can do both, and not just one or the other. Because sometimes there is a bit of a cynicism in activism, that inner work, like doing one's inner work that comes up, is kind of just wasting time not to act. And I think that it's very important that they belong together. I think that makes us more effective.
I couldn't agree more. That's been my whole experience, is that the foundation of constructive bridge building is first going to the balcony, you know, using that metaphor of like pausing, silence, and then really zooming in and asking what's going on inside of me, and zooming in what's really called for here, what's really wanted here, what do we really want, and then on that basis, then from a balcony perspective, to zoom out and see the larger picture as if it's a drama on the stage. You know, you're on the balcony overlooking the stage, and understand the different characters on the stage, of which I'm one. You know, we are all on that stage. But then you look at the main characters, and then you zoom in, you listen to them. But it all comes, if you don't start by listening to yourself, you don't have the emotional, mental space to truly listen to the other. And only by listening to others do we have a whisper of a chance of finding a better way out of the situation.
I very much agree, and that brings me to the next step. So there's my personal inner work, and that enables me to also feel my authentic contribution, and not the contribution that like out of panic, like, but out of a kind of an inner responsiveness. The other one is that I'm able to put myself into your shoes or anybody's shoes that is a player in a conflict. And I think it also enables us to see, wow, many feelings that we are having right now, they are actually I look at life in like two different types of processes. One process is emergent, creative, relational, and connected. Another type of process is non-emergent, repetitive, disrelated, and distant. That has a lack of care, has a lack of responsiveness. So when I look at society, then we see, okay, there is the world that is emerging, that is related. These are real structures of life that are evolving. But then there are many processes that are just repetitive. They are repetitions of the past. We're repeating those conversations, small conflicts, big conflicts, all kinds of issues, behavioral patterns, addictions, whatever, again and again and again and again. And I'm wondering, because I feel that this is a massive wake-up call for us to understand we cannot, as states, as the world, have no process in place to do our restorative work. You know, if there's racism, if there's colonialism, if there is the Second World War, the First World War, the Cold War, whatever it is, East-West separation, like how do we restore those massive impacts in order not to have to go through that experience again? We know that from the trauma science, there's a repetition compulsion to trauma. And so I would love to first hear from you a little bit about that, and then maybe also about your experience later of your work today.
That resonates deeply, what you're saying. It's almost as if I've been talking to a friend of mine who's a neuroscientist, but there's the left feeling part of the brain, which is the reactive mind, which is just, as you mentioned, it's kind of repetitive. It's designed to protect us, right? It's there. It evolved to protect us. And my experience in conflict, that it's fear-based and it's protective and it has its role. There's nothing wrong with it. It has its role. It has its own intelligence. And at the same time, in these complex conflicts between human beings at this time, that reactive mind leads us in ways that go directly contrary to what we truly want. As the saying goes, when angry, you will give the best speech you will ever regret. And when fearful, you will take the actions that will not lead you in the direction of wholeness, of connectedness, of peace, of security, of all the things that we want. And it feels like we're caught in this dilemma of two, reactive minds trigger reactive minds. And we know how that goes. As Gandhi put it so long ago, he said, an eye for an eye, and we all go blind. And that's what's happening is,
Right.
I see this happening again and again, is that the truth is no one wins these wars. You can win a battle, of course, with superior force, but everybody loses the war. That's been my experience, 45 years as a wandering anthropologist, all the different war zones. I've yet to see a war that someone really wins. They may think they win because they win the battles, but then in the long run, everybody loses. And the whole secret, in just going back to the brain, is, when I say go to the balcony, it means activating the part of the brain that's generally located on the right side, and that actually is the part that's aware, where there's awareness and which is connected, right? This part of the brain is disconnected. It's it's everything is separate, and everything is a potential threat. And what we're called upon to do is to shift from this left feeling part of the brain to the right. It's a right thinking part of the brain, but it's a right seeing, awareness that then can come back and take care and listen to it's not like you just, oh, this is right, this is not good. No, you come back and you embrace all the parts of us, including the part of us that feels scared, that feels fearful, that sees a world in which everyone is separate, that there isn't enough to go around, that you're a danger to me. And so the question is, how do we make that shift individually and then collectively, so that we can create the world that we all want for ourselves and for our children and our grandchildren? And that's to me the challenge right now. And then very specifically, you take it into a specific moment like this moment with the war between Russia and Ukraine. And it's so easy to see these dynamics of good versus evil, you just see this reactive, but we know how it ends. We all know how the story ends. It ends with everyone losing, unless we can do the deep work that you work on of bringing the unconscious, making it conscious, bringing internal compassion to our own feelings, and then bringing it to those that we deal with, and slowly transforming the situation. And we have historical examples. So this is not just kind of like pie in the sky. I mean, if we look at the history of the last century, you have examples where, like, we got into World War I, and I mean, it was like the craziest war. And at the end of World War I, what happened was there was a punitive peace on Germany, and the seeds were laid for World War II. There was just a brief interlude. I mean, World War I and World War II are really just one war. We missed that opportunity. And then at the end of World War II, there was a more intelligent response, which let's embrace the enemies. And so you have the paradox that the two losers of World War II, Germany and Japan, became the two economic success stories because they were embraced in the urban community. We created an interconnected network. And unfortunately, at the end of the Cold War, we made the same mistake that we made at the end of World War I, which was that we didn't embrace Russia. And now we're faced with the consequences of it. But it's not too late. I mean, it's hard, it's incredibly hard, but we have that same opportunity to create a world in which we're interconnected with Russia, with China, with the US, that it's an interconnected humanity that can deal with even the hardest differences, that can then create, the security, the identity, the recognition, and, deal with the problems that we have with climate. It's like we have door number A and door number B. Do you want to go down this path towards a world in which everyone is unsafe and there isn't enough and the climate, or do we want to go down door B? And it feels to me we're at this moment of intense crisis, but also a moment when there's an opportunity to wake up and say, let's start to create the world that we do want, even in the midst of this tragedy that's going on today.
Maybe you can speak a bit more to how you see, like, what has been missed after the Cold War, and what could we have done, like a little bit more in detail, in order to avoid to not have this come into this situation now.
Yeah. It's very sad, but it's really important to go back and learn these lessons. But at the end of the Cold War, there was a kind of triumphalism like we won the Cold War. That's not actually true. The West won the Cold War, and the Berlin Wall came down, and there was an opportunity when, if you put yourself in the shoes of the Russians and all the peoples of the former Soviet Union, it was humiliating. And it was not just humiliating to go from being, there are two great powers of the world, to being, weak, but people were on the streets begging. The economy was destroyed. The sense of, in those years in Moscow, there was a fear that civil war would break out. And we had a chance, I mean the West, had a chance to really reach out and embrace the way that was done with Germany or Japan, and embrace the former adversary and help them to their feet, really. Instead, what did we choose to do? The wisest people among us, the ones who really knew the Soviet Union, said, do not take advantage of Russia while it's down. Do not expand NATO right up to the borders of Russia. Understanding Russian history, understanding the sensitivities that Russia had been invaded so many times from the West by the Swedes, by the Poles, by Napoleon, by the Germans twice. They have this insecurity, they have this trauma. Don't, but embrace them. Russia become part of NATO, just create an interconnected European security architecture and economic architecture that embraces. And instead, what did we do? We expanded NATO, kept on expanding it, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, all the way, and then offering NATO membership to Ukraine, so it's like we humiliated Russia. And we don't see that. We humiliated them. And then you created, Yeltsin felt that he handed power to Putin as a man who could restore order and make Russia strong again. And that was his mandate. It was very popular. And so we don't realize how we created the phenomenon now that we're facing now. But what we're facing today, there were many people, including the people who knew the Soviet Union best, who said back in 1990s, if you make these moves, you will regret this day. And now we're at this day. And now we say, oh, those are the bad people, whatever, but we have no sense of our own history, of our own co-responsibility, co-creation of this phenomenon. That's not to say that it's not in any way to justify what's just happened now in terms of the invasion. That's also a reactive behavior that is exactly opposite to its own. And Putin may win a battle, but he's already lost the war. He's made the biggest mistake. He's fallen into that reactive trap. But if we're going to deal with this, we need to deal with it from a point of view of empathy, and understand empathy for ourselves, empathy for the others, and understanding how we're part of this play. It's not just that, oh, we're the innocent ones here.
Beautiful, William, amazing. This was so important, how you detailed the process. And like from a collective trauma perspective, we could say that the absence that's needed in order not to feel that's our job. Mm-hmm. The absence in the Western countries that is not aware of what you said, that's what we need to take care of. That happened for a reason. Like when we say that the Western countries weren't aware of that, what you said, enough, and that has a reason. That's a process. And to look at that process, we have to do urgently, even while that's happening, what's happening, because it has a reason why we didn't come with more compassion, more support, more, like, why did that not happen?
Yeah.
And I think it's we can say on the one hand, it's a missed opportunity, but it's also, it's in it on a deeper level, it's an absence that is lacking relation, because otherwise that would have happened.
That's true.
So that's part of the collective trauma reenactment, because it reenacts itself step by step. It's not just like the monster comes out of the lake and is suddenly here. It built itself over years, and I think that such a, like what you said, is so important, because it's so important to, like, it's so easy to fall back into the same polarization and othering that anyway led up to the situation now. So what happens to the collective immune system? And we were talking in other conversations about how the collective immune system needs to embrace this situation, like actually how the whole world needs to stand up or get up and be there. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit to maybe two things, like what is, like, what do you see is your part to contribute to this situation, and maybe if that's okay, and maybe also how do we activate the global immune response in a way that is really constructive and not part of the destruction?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'll just say too that, you know, the other path was available to us. I mean, you know, I remember Russia in the early 90s. We were talking about, where's the Marshall Plan? You know, where's, you know, the Marshall Plan that brought Europe to its feet again in the wake of, you know, the ruins of the Cold War. Where was the really helping, you know? And, you know, the European community was like born of, like, you know, France and Germany had fought each other 3 times in the previous 75 years. There wasn't a family in France or Germany that hadn't lost a member. And what are we going to do? Are we going to just repeat the same pattern that, you know, from World War I? No, we're going to break the pattern. We're going to make, now France and Germany are the closest of allies. And if, you know, before, if someone wanted, you know, a German wanted to, you know, have land in France, you conquer. No, you just go buy a little apartment in Paris or Alsace or whatever. You know, they're interconnected. And that's the path forward. So now we're faced with this, which is really sad because we lost a major opportunity. But the truth is, it's never too late to learn. And right now, this should wake us up to learn that the only skillful response to exclusion, you know, we kind of excluded Russia. And what do we get back? We get exclusion, of course, right? Exclusion breeds exclusion. And so right now, Russia, Putin, they've invaded. That's an exclusive move. And so we're just excluding them, you know, get them out of the, you know, sanctions, you know, militarize Europe again or whatever. But we know where that leads. The only skillful way in the long run is, you may have to take those kinds of measures. I'm not even saying that you don't. But the larger strategy has to be a strategy of inclusion. You know, it's like that poem that I've shared with you before is like, you know, they drew a circle and shut me out. You know, a rebel, a heretic, a thing to flout, to whip. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took them in. So the only remedy, effective remedy for when the other side shuts you out, is we have to create a wider inclusion. Now, is that going to be easy? This is the hardest work that human beings can do. It's extremely hard, but right now, this is what I'm devoting myself to. Is it's not, we have to bring an end as soon as possible and stop the war in Ukraine. But I've been in so many wars. You have a ceasefire, you know, living where you are, you know, you have a ceasefire, it breaks, you know, unless that is embedded in a larger vision of mutual benefit, of mutual security, it's very unstable. And so we need to create a vision in which every country in Europe, including Russia, including Ukraine, has security, has a sense of safety, has a sense of sovereignty, has a sense of identity. Is it possible? We just saw it happen at the end of World War II with France and Germany and all the other countries there. It can happen again here. And not only this time, it has to happen globally, because now everything is interconnected. It has to happen with China, because now we're facing a possibility where we go into a Cold War with Russia and a Cold War with China. And then we have these three great powers, Russia, China, and the West, all competing with each other, all with nuclear weapons. It's a world, it's a dystopia. And in fact, we have the opportunity now to wake up and realize we have to kind of find a way to interconnect. We're always going to have differences. We're always going to have conflicts. It's not about just some kind of harmonious peace, but it's like, but how do we handle those conflicts? Do we handle those conflicts, constructively, through negotiation, through dialogue, through mutual understanding, through negotiation, through democracy, and so on? Or do we handle them destructively through war, ultimately, and through the risk of destroying everything that we care about in this world? So to me, that's the choice that we face. And so for me, what I'm looking at is, where's the way out? Even right now, with all the terrors and the horrors that are going on right now, with the Russian tanks surrounding Kyiv, in Ukraine, how do we bring it to a stop within a larger vision of a new European security and economic architecture that includes Russia, includes Ukraine, in which all can benefit? And we have a very good example of what happened at the end of World War II. We just need to kind of learn from what has worked in the past and really be creative and bring our collective intelligence to bear on this around the world. So to me, we're at a it's like an inflection point right now in history and in our evolution. And we can choose the old way, the reactive way you're talking about, the repetitive trauma-based way, or we can choose the other doorway, which is hard. This is hard work for us because, it's much easier just to make that the enemy and they're the wrong and go after them and, and build up, that path. But we know where that path leads. It does not lead in a good way. And so this is really hard work, but I believe it can be done. And in fact, it's our only choice right now. To me, the only sensible choice, the wise choice, is to keep our hearts open, to do the trauma work, because there's so much trauma. Let me just, if I may, just share with you, take Putin. He's the principal decision maker on the other side. We want to just demonize him. We want to bring him up for war crimes, put him in The Hague, and that's the way to do it. Right now he's the leader of that power. He has 6,000 nuclear weapons. Do we really want to back him into a total corner? And it's actually, what's interesting is in Russia right now, his popularity is going up. It's interesting. So it's not just Putin. We're dealing with Russia and Russia's own, the Russian people's own sense of insecurity. But if I go back and I look empathetically and I think, okay, Putin, how do I start? How do I influence that one mind? At first, I need to understand. And then I go back and I say, I look at things like there's something that's not showing up in the media at all. It's just like, who is Putin? Where did he come from? What was he like as a child? Where all your patterns are set. He was born in Leningrad, St. Petersburg. Just a few years after 1 million people in Leningrad died as the Nazis surrounded Leningrad and was a siege and they were starving. His elder brother died. He had starved, died in that. His mother almost died. She was thrown as a corpse into a pile of corpses. They thought she was dead. And then someone heard a sound and they pulled her out. Then he's born. that's the trauma conditions in which he's born. And so just to understand that a little bit, like, oh, okay, that's the kind of emotional mentality of, and then to watch the humiliation of the post-Soviet order. So he wants strength, stability, force. That it's force that comes out of humiliation. So we need to go to the roots of this if we're going to change this phenomenon in him and in the Russian people generally.
Amazing. Like I completely agree. And I was gonna say, that when I hear you speak, it's, first of all, I think it's very beautiful how you like opened the map of the current situation, and also how you hold the energy of inclusion when the energy of exclusion is very strong. Like that we don't give up on those high values and on that kind of inner alignment. And the other thing is, at least that's how I look at it, when also like in intimate relationships, when you say, okay, actually we could do this and this and this and this and that. And then when you look at the real relationship dynamic, even if we know that that's good, we don't do it because we fall back into these older patterns. And that's exactly where comes into play, where what you said at the end, that we have to do the inner work that enables us to make that choice. Because otherwise, often, at least that's how I look at it, the past chooses for us. The unconscious past, the choice has been made already in the past. It's a repetitive process. It doesn't have a future until unless we really include the split of pain or the split of trauma and reintegrate it as learning into ourselves. Because when I look at, this, like I often say that the integrated history is presence. It's not behind us. It's what's talking here. It's integrated history is talking. Plus, unintegrated history is the past that maybe comes up while we are talking. And so, but that changes a bit the whole vision of life. It's not that everything, it's alive in us. And the split off part is history. And I think in the permafrost of what you said of Leningrad, Stalingrad, Berlin, like the whole Second World War, the Holocaust, there's a thick permafrost and trauma layer, but in the ice is the ethical restoration that hasn't happened yet. And it's the ethical learning that we so badly need to deal with climate change, with nuclear weapons, with AI, with nanotechnology, with genetic engineering. Because if we don't harvest that learning, we can't deal with the stuff that's coming up now. That is the leading edge development now, because suddenly we have technologies at hand. Without the right ethical development, we're gonna, there's a lot of potential to mess things up. And I think that I want to underline what you said at the end, because if we don't get that part, we continue choosing the separation. If I don't see that collectively on a large scale, we have to do that kind of work and learn how to do that. Because otherwise we know what's good, like how it would be great, but we're not doing it. And your vision is already very high. Like I think what you said right now is holding a very high vision for the world. But how can we as a collective, not a few individuals, how can we as a collective grow into that? Because otherwise we won't make those choices. And it seems like we didn't make that choice after the Cold War. As a world, we didn't choose like this. And I think I find it very interesting that you came back to understanding, when I put myself into the shoes of somebody else that I want to understand deeper, then I need to face the fact that to see the traumatization that leads up to certain behavior, and my own also. And where I don't have that empathy, trauma is at work between us.
That's it. That's exactly it. And that's the work is to take what's unconscious, make it conscious, to take what's disassociated and reconnect it. And I can see, you know, you and I have had I've had the benefit of learning, you know, a lot from you over our conversations in the past. And to me, it's directly relevant to this particular situation in the world today. And the practical work of how do we operationalize this? What does it mean in terms of practical actions right now, right here for the whole world? And, you know, the one thing that I noticed in this phenomenon, even in the last week, because it's been a week now since the beginning of the invasion, you know, for me, when I've asked this question of where's the secret, what's the secret to peace here? What's the secret, not to the peace of the heavens, but, you know, the peaceful ways of dealing with the conflicts that we have in the world today. It's us. It's, you know, what I call the third side. It's what I saw, you know, when I, as an anthropologist studying, you know, hunter-gatherer tribes, you know, they gather, the whole community gathers around the campfire, right? And I see that happening today, right now. It's like, yes, you know, but there's a worldwide community around this conflict that's saying no to violence, no to war, no to destruction, yes to let's find ways of talking this out, let's find solutions, let's find ways of moving forward in a constructive way. So there's, I mean, what's interesting, and I don't think Putin realized it, because he you know, he uses force right now. And force to me is born fundamentally out of humiliation. It's like out of humiliation, I'm going to force my way on you. I'm going to force my way on the Ukrainians. What he doesn't realize is that force is strong and it can accomplish some things and terrible things, but force in the end is weaker than power. And by power, I mean genuine power of the kind that we talk about. And there's a power of unity showing up in the world today of saying, basta, enough. This cannot happen in the 21st century. You know, what we're watching, these scenes in Kiev and Kharkiv and Kherson, and just, it's not acceptable anymore. And so basically we have the beginnings of a global campfire where we can embrace the conflict. We can embrace Ukraine and Russia and see it in a larger perspective and create a container within which even the most difficult conflict can gradually change its form. Will there be an ultimate resolution? Who knows? But change the form from killing each other to talking with each other and finding other ways forward. And I think that to me gives me hope, is that I don't think anyone anticipated the amount of unity around the world, not just in Europe, but in Brazil, in Africa, in Asia. The whole world is paying attention and is saying, we need to find a better way. And to me, this is a wake-up call. So there's that power. And no matter how strong the force is of Russia, it can never be stronger than the power of the community, the power of the whole world, the power of the third side. And that's what gives me hope today.
Yeah, I also see this, that the world shrank through the technology and the data speed. Like the world became smaller and suddenly everything is more intimate. And in this situation, I think also there is a strong kind of activation of the third side. I think that's very powerful. That's true power. And that we practice, like, how am I getting enrolled as the third side in the fragmentation?
Yes.
You know, that like the third side can just join the fragmentation, or it can be really a unifying force that unites the fragmentation into something higher. And here's one thought that I want to run by you. So I had like in one of my last training programs, there was a process around like East Germany, and I did, as you know, I did multiple larger scale processes around the integration of East-West Germany. Now we are writing a proposal to file to the European Union to create an East-West integration, because in this process, I said to somebody, you know, I have no idea how it feels to grow up in the former East Germany, You don't know how it is to grow up in Vienna. But the power we have is that I learn from you and you learn from me. So, and what I mean by that is that what happened is, like the former East, after the wall came down, the East has been pushed into the West. Like it has been absorbed. But that doesn't work. That's not a new Germany. That's kind of like Pac-Man. And then like what we need to do now is, because we see the potential fracture in Germany, but also in Europe is still there. But when we learn from each other, information flows and starts creating a new Germany or a new Europe that is the integrated version of the two former sides. And I think that has to happen in entire Europe, because that's the only way to create an integrated Europe that is more stable. Otherwise, the stability of Europe is not resilient, it's not grounded, because it has a kind of a fracture inside, and that can break easily. And we see it in other parts in the world where there was kind of an absorption because there was suddenly more power, but it doesn't put us on the same level of citizenship.
Yeah.
Even psychologically inside, even if we have the same rights, but there is a crack. And I wanted to know what you hear or what you think when you hear me say that.
No, I'm absolutely, you and I are absolutely in agreement and resonance on this. It's like the invitation right now is to learn the lesson of the way in which Germany was integrated, where the stronger side just incorporated the weaker side. Right now, there's an opportunity to create a new Europe, a Europe that extends all the way from the Atlantic to the Urals or wherever, Siberia, whatever. But it's like, it's a Europe. It's not going to be, everyone's saying, well, Ukraine should be part of EU or whatever. No, we have to create something new that's larger, that incorporates the best of the European community, incorporates the best of NATO, incorporates the best of Russia. And that's what's being called forth, is to create something new, which is what happened, at the end of World War II, was to create, the European community was an integrative thing, this is going to be something larger. And so that's what we're being invited to do, is to create something new that respects the contributions of all the players and creates some new higher order integration. And that's exciting. I mean, that's really exciting. And that's what's needed. In fact, long before this war, a new European architecture, security architecture was needed. We could see it. This war just brings it in our face, but it's been needed for years to create a new integration, right? And so we're at this moment, it's this very exciting moment where you can look the danger in the eye. You can look the danger of world apocalypse in the eye even, and step back and say, there's a world in which it could all work. It's all possible. And that's the thing, when people ask me, they say, after 45 years, they say, well, William, you wander around all these war zones. Are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? Of course I have to be an optimist in some sense to do my work, but what I like to say is I'm a possibilist. That's what I believe in human possibility. I've seen it happen with my own eyes. I saw apartheid, which everyone thought was going to go on forever, transform. I saw the end of the Cold War, which everyone thought again was going to go on forever. I've seen these, in Colombia, the end of a 50-year civil war. This could happen. This could happen. And I know it because I'm not just saying it out of belief. I've seen it happen. I've seen human beings do it. We can do this, and it will call a lot upon us. It will be very difficult work. It's not easy. It will take sacrifice, but it is possible. And it's a world that's based not on force, which derives from humiliation, but on genuine power, which comes from humility. Third side is a power that comes from humility, the humility of being, humus, on the ground, part of the community. It's not about, there's a humbleness to the power because it's in every one of us. And as the old African proverb goes, when spider webs unite, they can halt even a lion. If each of us takes our own spider webs and we unite in a giant spider web, we can halt the lion of war.
That's right. Very much so. Very much so. And I think the integration that you spoke about is a central piece. And it's also, I'm wondering also how, and then I see the time, I think we already have the time flies by whenever we talk. It's like we're getting into this. It's so lovely. And, I see also that the current world situation means also that we have to let go of some old identity structures that are not anymore serving. Even what you said, to create this pan-European security structure means that certain identity structures need to be able to be reconstructed or let go of in order to create a bigger system, which actually climate change is calling us on a global level, as you said, to do. But in order to do that, some identity structures need to dissolve in order to make space, like in a way be sacrificed to make space for something bigger. Like a sacrifice is like making space to allow something bigger to come in. And in a way, I'm like, and the identity structure still can change, but if they are iced over, they become rigid. They can't move. So evolution bumps against this because you cannot bump against something that's fluid. And it's so beautiful what you said is like when there is flow, openness, fluidity, river, force cannot hit. But when there is stagnation, then the force bumps against force and it creates a counter reaction all the time. So to turn our legacy into flow, to turn frozenness into flow is the best thing we can offer to that vision that you drew now, because that's actually what we need in order to harvest that power and not end up in force again, bumping against, the aftermath of the prior force. And like this, how trauma constantly reenacts itself. That's beautiful.
It's very beautiful. There's a jujitsu move, like because when the force comes and you redirect the force, right? And through genuine power, as you were saying, from frozenness to flow, and that's exactly it. That's what we're being called upon. And what do we have to give up? We have to give up our frozenness.
Yeah.
Is difficult sometimes because our frozenness is what we think protects us, but it doesn't really protect us. It just leads us in. So it's going to take that work that you watch so often on an individual scale, of an individual starting to relax and welcome in the love of and compassion of others around them. And we now need to do that on a collective scale.
Exactly.
And we might have to abandon certain identities, but the truth is, what in the end we're going to have is we're going to all meet our deep need for identity at the smallest scale, like little concentric circles, like little Russian dolls, all the way out to the global scale and beyond even. But it's like we're being invited to construct our identities, on the basis of security and safety, starting in ourselves and then radiating out to a world that's safe for everyone.
That's right. And we do need that. Like the pandemic showed us this, the current situation shows us this, because the climate change effects are asking for a different response. Otherwise, I think all the stored frozenness, if we respond to climate change, and we are not responding anyway enough. So I think that's going to be not the resilience that is needed in order to create a safe humanity for our journey. Yeah, that's beautiful, William.
And interestingly, let me just add one thing, that I think that actually working on climate change actually could be one of the keys to creating this new architecture. It's not just, everything gets intermeshed. But right now, so much of the war, is about energy and where those pipelines are going to go. And the world needs to move to renewable energy. And that could be actually, interestingly, in the larger context in which Ukraine, the war comes to an end. It's a war. It's a larger context in which we move towards renewable energy and diminish the effects of climate change. So there's a better world awaiting for us if we can take this as a wake-up call.
Exactly. William, it's so amazing. I'm so happy to talk to you. It's always, we didn't talk for a longer time now, but it's every time we come together, I feel this closeness, like the spark goes on, and like we are together in a space. It's lovely. It's so resonant, and I'm so much with everything you said. I mean, it speaks from my heart. To listen to you speaks to what is in my heart. So that's beautiful. And if you have any last words for this conversation, I know we will have others. So if there's anything you want to add.
I would just say this, that every one of us is a third sider here in this play. Every one of us can activate this global social immune system that helps us transform even the most difficult, most painful conflicts. We are Ukrainians, we are Russians. It's all, and any one of us has the ability within their circle to actually activate the third side and keep the doors open to compassion, to love, to awareness, to witnessing, even if it's showing up and just witnessing with an open heart, like you do so beautifully, Thomas, and your whole community does. That's not just passive, that's active. And it's shifting the energetic environment in which we can then find a way materially, objectively, emotionally, psychologically to begin to heal the deep traumas that produce war. And that can, if we heal, and I think we can all heal, I honestly believe it. I've been in the worst places in the world. I've seen it happen, and I can tell you it can happen, and it depends on us, starting with our own work and then radiating it out to the whole world.
Voila, that's right. Beautiful, William. Thank you so much. I think many people will get a lot out of this conversation, and it was great. I'm looking forward to our next part of this series, and I wish you a great time.
Thank you, Thomas.
And
it's
a lot of blessing for your work.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going right now. I have a little window of time, and I'm going to go. I don't know if it took you in Creston to the stupa. There's a huge Buddhist stupa, and they're celebrating. This is Tibetan New Year. And,
beautiful!
I'm going to pray for the peace of Ukraine.
Oh, beautiful! Fantastic. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Thomas. Really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to our next conversation soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl. Stay connected and get updates about new episodes by visiting our website, pointofrelationpodcast.com, and by subscribing to the Thomas Hübl YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share about us with your community on social media. Thank you. We appreciate your support.